All right. And hello and welcome. We are the Unschooling Squad, a group of three mothers, myself, Dhyāna Kluth, Lisa Guillard, and Ana Maria Nichim Luna, who came together to support each other as we navigate the path of unschooling and unlearning to nurture the children that we are privileged to share our lives with. You may hear some of them playing on the front porch here through our meeting. In our monthly meetings, we started off as a book club, and we soon found ourselves diving deep, grieving and celebrating the challenges and the beautiful growth we witnessed in each other and our families. So now we are bringing these conversations out into the public once a month with invited guests to continue to share the revelations of unschooling and self-directed learning to inspire and support you on your path, and for us to learn, continue to learn. We greet you from the sacred indigenous unceded lands originally inhabited by the Lenni Lenape peoples, where the Unschooling Squad are grateful to be living with our families and continuing the earth conscious tradition of honoring the land, honoring the ancestral caregivers of these lands. And as we honor the ancestors of our varied lineages, we welcome their guidance and wisdom in our lives with humble gratitude. And as we create this circle for this conversation, it is with humility of the ones who are always learning that we welcome our guest, Chemay Morales James. Thank you for joining our conversation to share your experience and wisdom with us in this work we value so much. And before we begin our conversation, Ana Maria is going to read a bit of your bio for our viewers.
Thank you, Dhyāna. I might go off camera as I try to figure out my tech, which I'm not very good at yet. But hi, everybody. I'm Ana Maria. I'm one of the squad members. And I am so privileged to introduce Chemay today, who's a powerhouse. Chemay Morales James is the founder of My Reflection Matters, LLC, which is an online resource hub for parents and educators seeking products and services that center the identities of Black and Brown children. Through My Reflection Matters, Chemay serves as an equity and liberation coach and consultant, offering coaching and training to individuals or organizations seeking guidance and creating equitable and liberating spaces for youth of color. Under My Reflection Matters, Chemay recently launched this amazing space online that I'm loving, which is called My Reflection Matters Village, a virtual co-learning community for primarily BIPOC families and radical educators seeking support in navigating self-directed liberatory education. She is also the parent organizer and founder of Connecticut's first self-directed learning cooperative for Black and Brown unschooling and homeschooling families in Waterbury, Connecticut. She's a published author of several education articles and 2 books, The ABCs of the Black Panther Party and Let's Talk About Race, a family guide to raising kids with positive racial and ethnic identities. And there's so much more to Chemay that I would love to share, but I really want to get us back to our conversation so you guys get to know Chemay directly and hear her voice and know of her amazing work. Welcome, Chemay.
Thank you guys for having me. I sound fancy on paper.
So fancy.
I appreciate the welcome. This is exciting.
Well, we appreciate you being here, Chemay. Thank you so much. I'm Lisa. And to get us started, we would really love to hear about your journey to unschooling, how you
came about this lifestyle and what unschooling looks like for your family and in your life right now.
Yeah, so, I guess I didn't realize we're all natural unschoolers, right? I didn't know that because I didn't have the language. And it wasn't until my eldest son, he's now, going to be 9, but when he was about 4, and it was preschool age, close to 4, we thought we had to put him in preschool because that's what people do, right? And so we started preschool that lasted for about 3 days. And I just remember when my husband Shane and I brought him to the preschool program, which, took us a while to find because I was not looking for something traditional. We were, went to Montessori schools. This is an art-based preschool. They follow, the Reggio model of education. And so, I liked the philosophy. I really liked when I observed what the teachers were doing in terms of following children's leads and, using just like sort of everyday moments as a learning opportunity. But there's still a lot of structure, right? Even within that model of education. And I remember my son just really resisting. It was torturous for us to watch him, behind the video screen in a little observatory room, him kicking the doors. I had never seen him behave in that way ever. I was just like, oh my God, what is going on? I mean, just running to the door, kicking, I want my mommy, I want to leave. The teachers would try to bring him over to the circle and he was like pulling away, and I was just like mortified. My heart shattered. I just remember crying and feeling like, what are we doing? And who said that he has to be here? Like, who told me that? And it was in that moment that by day 3, Shane and I were just like, we're going to pull him. Like, clearly he doesn't want to be there. And there's really no reason other than the world telling us we have to do this thing. So I thought, well, I still had a very schoolish mindset in terms of like, well, I could do school at home. I'm a teacher. We could do this thing. And I started just researching home schooling, home education. And then I stumbled upon a video with Akilah S. Richards. And it was her and a couple of other families who were, engaging in unschooling. And as she was talking, I said, oh my God, like, I love this. Like, this philosophy is beautiful and I need to learn more. So I just started it was just something in my gut, my intuition felt it felt right. It felt peaceful. It felt natural, the way she was describing unschooling and self-directed education. And so I just started digging. I started reading, I started watching, videos, listening to her podcast, listening to other interviews. And that really just, that was our unschooling journey. That's sort of how it started, was just the resistance of my child to school that forced us to have to really question, do we have to do this thing they call school? And we opted out. And honestly, like, we haven't gone back and don't plan to, unless my children decide that's something they want to do. But at this stage, we're just really happy with this lifestyle. So that's how it started with the tantrum in the preschool classroom. Oh,
Sorry. I had to unmute myself, but I'm so moved to hear that because I do feel like it's so normalized to watch our children suffer.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we are trained to go against our empathy for our child who's suffering. And so I always want to say to all the mothers that were able to feel that in their heart, to still stay connected, just like congratulations for that, because it's so easy for us to tune away or turn away from our own intuitive knowing.
Yeah.
So yes to you for that. It's that one moment where we really engage in true liberation, where we can still stay in the entirety of our human capabilities, which and empathy is one of them, right?
I mean, I didn't realize it then, right? In terms of, like you said, that's stepping into a path of liberation. I do remember feeling like, is there something wrong with me? Because other parents are looking at me like, oh, it's okay. This is normal. Just let him cry it out. He'll be fine by the end of the week. And even the teachers were saying that. you know, there were moments where I find myself coming back to, they're like, no, 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 just walk away. And he's crying. And I'm like, but my child's crying. Like, how can I not want to comfort my child? It just, my body felt it was so wrong. And I'm so thankful that, you know, my husband felt the same thing and was just like, let's just pull him, even though we didn't know what we were going to do after that, you know?
Yeah.
It's like unschooling from the beginning, right? You were recognizing your child as your guide and you're following his lead and what was being shown to you in that moment. And yeah, I have a very similar story, you know, nursery school, and that was it for us as well. So
same story here, very similar. And thank goodness my partner was also on board. It didn't feel right. We were seeing the light, right, dim in the child that we knew to be just happy and
I know.
full of vitality.
And it happens like that, right? Like, it's like, I've never seen my child act like this. It literally went like this. It went from, you know, 0 to like 100 instantly. And to this day, he remembers that. To this day, like if we mention school or something, he says, oh, well, I remember going to school and you left, you know? And I'm like, oh my God. There's like, I still have some guilt tied to that. And I know intellectually I shouldn't, but I can't help but feel that sometimes when he mentions it and he remembers the feelings haven't been lost in him. So those three days were really powerful for him. And I just often wonder how many other children experience that and were forced to just live it, right? And to suppress it. And their parents are forced to live it and suppress it. And what does that do to your body? Like, what does that do to yourself as you grow? It's a scary thing for me.
Yeah, you know, and that makes me think of too, this piece that we don't come to know until much later in our unschooling journey. I mean, some of us may be earlier than others, I'm not sure, but for me, it took me a long time to understand who my child was truly, you know, as a whole being that I thought I knew. I thought I was loving and giving to my child in that kind of full holistic way. But the truth of the matter is that there's so many underlying sensibilities that children come with, right? So a child who's highly empathetic, highly sensitive, and who can go from 0 to 100, for example, for various triggers, might really be affected by an experience like that. Whereas there's another child who has a whole different makeup, functions in a whole different way, who can enter into that environment and just feel like, oh, this is my tribe, or this is where I need to be. Yeah. And we haven't been educated in a way to observe, number one, acknowledge, number two, and be sensitive to who these children are that are arriving into our lives. And yeah, I feel like I'm really thankful to unschooling. I'm definitely really thankful to unschooling for giving me that time to actually observe that.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That, you know, when you mentioned the sensitivity part, that's something that I began to learn about Judah, my eldest, and his sensitivity to like energy and people and spaces. And I didn't realize it then. And not even when I think back to even as an infant, how sensitive he was. You know, it's all connecting now as I've been getting to know my child. And like you said, spending more time just paying attention, observing, asking questions. You know, yeah, unschooling has forced me to do that. You know, it has taught me to be quiet and just watch, watch and listen, really.
Already, we've just opened up so many doors to conversations that could take up each an entire hour.
Yeah.
That we could really dive into each one of that, like the foundational, you know, psychosocial development of children, and just, you know, at the root, is it safe for me to be here, to exist? And, you know, our job, the first like 7 years, is helping to lay all these layers of foundations for them that we really have disrupted in this school age timeline. Yeah, so profound. And what you said also, Anna Maria, about like how different it is for different children, and how unschooling gives that, you know, and homeschooling and self-directed learning gives children that opportunity to explore, and families to observe what their children's needs and wants are, and create that container that allows them to flourish. I'm wondering how if you can dive more into how you've nurtured and allowed your, you know, family to flourish and thrive.
Yeah, you know, it's this journey has, well, and it's a journey, that's for sure. And there's like no end to this path, as you all know, to this. You know, with my kids, the challenge for me has been to like let go a lot of like the schoolishness thoughts deep into my head, whether I want them to or not. They just pop up, you know, because I've been so socialized, so conditioned to believe education to be a certain way or to look a certain way. So it does take a lot of consciousness to like notice it and to be like, push it off, right? Like I'm starting to feel this thing and I know what that is and I need to like move it over there. And it's, for me, I need to be able to do that so that my kids can flourish and can be their full selves at home. And one of the things I do with my kids is we talk a lot about accountability. And I have a lot of conversations with my kids about even how I was raised and how there are some things that are similar and some things that are different, and those things that are different, that, you know, they have the power to hold me accountable, right? They have the power to hold anyone accountable, whether they're younger, the same age, or older than them. No one can be the boss of their bodies and their beings. And so, you know, there are going to be times where I might be slipping and I might be doing some things that, you know, because that's what I was used to growing up. And when I do these things, like if mommy starts to yell, right, which is still a thing that I'm trying to like let go. You know, you have the right to hold me accountable. You have the right to say, please stop yelling at me. I feel like you're hurting me. You're hurting my feelings. You're disrupting my flow, whatever it is that you're feeling. And so that I know, okay, I need to stop. I need to pause. I need to walk away, because sometimes I allow that to control me in a point where I can't even think clearly enough to say, this thing is here, you need to move it over. And sometimes I need them to point, that thing is there, mommy, and I'm pushing it for you. So that has been a practice that we have been trying to do in our household, and that I want to normalize for my children, because I want them to feel empowered to be able to do that for themselves, and to also be able to hold people accountable that are in their lives that might be hurting them, that might be doing things that make them feel uncomfortable. And I know I didn't have those tools when I was a kid. You know, I didn't always have those tools. I was told to, you know, follow authority, you know, follow the rules, be good, be silent. That's what a good girl does, right? So I've had to, as an adult, learn to break away from that. And I don't want them to have to learn how to break away. I just want them to know how to do it now, you know?
I think what you're naming here, you know, I feel like there's so much potential with self-directed learning and unschooling for world change, really.
Yes.
What you just named here, empowering young people to be in their power and not take their power away, and to be able to, yes, call out anybody, you know, for their self-sovereignty. And I think that, right, this is something that we don't, is completely, not only is it not normalized, but it's vilified in a conventional schooling culture, where what you're saying, right, it's so challenging for us because we grew up in this culture of defaulting to authority figures. But by raising kids in this way, where it's like, you know what, I'm failing, but I want you to be comfortable calling me out and like, you know, basically speaking power. So I just think I just wanted to like really focus on that for a second, because I think that that's, you know, that's really a lot of where all the work is, right? It's not even about education. It's about maintaining our wholeness that we're born with. And our kids are closer to that than we are, because
They
we've had
absolutely
so
are.
much conditioning that we're, and now we're trying to do all the deconditioning. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, it's real. The struggle is real.
Yeah, I wonder if we can just zoom in on that moment for listeners who may be journeying with this for the first time, and like if they're going to be faced with that moment when they are held accountable by their children, right? It's easy to say, okay, when your child says this, and say, hold us accountable, and then we'll move it away. But zoom in, and what is going on in you in that moment, and how are you able to turn, what of all those conditionings and feelings, like there's a lot going on in that moment, right, in us as we're letting go or being triggered by
Yeah,
our children holding
yeah.
us accountable, right?
That's a really good question. I love that question because, well, you're really pushing me to think about what those feelings are. And I think it's our ability to tune into those feelings that decolonize our practices as parents, right? Decolonization is a tuning into our intuition, to the things that we feel that we've been numbed to not feel for so long. So for me, when that happens, sometimes there's sort of like this conflict going on. Like my initial reaction is to want to say to what a lot of adults said to me was like, be quiet, that's disrespectful, right? Like don't say, like that's what like the ghosts want to say, tell me to tell my kids, like, who are they to tell you, mommy, stop doing that? You can't yell at me, or no, I'm not going to do this, right? So there's an initial sort of like, huh? Like I find myself going, wait. And then for me, it's a pause. So that's the most important practice for me, is to not say anything and to just pause in that moment and remember the conversations that we had around accountability, and to acknowledge, you're right. Yeah, to acknowledge their feelings and to acknowledge them holding me accountable, because that's our agreement. And sometimes I do have to take a breath. Like in that pause, I had to take a deep breath, kind of just like cool myself down, because I could feel like the blood pressure rising and like wanting to react in a way that just wants to shut the whole thing down and forget about like what I said before. Yeah, so that pause, that deep breath, that reflection, and then that acknowledgement of what I'm doing. And a lot of times I have to apologize, right? Like that often leads to an apology. I apologize a lot to my children for a thing I wish I didn't, but there are things that, that I've fallen back into in terms of schoolishness ways. And after that pause, there's an asking for, how do I repair any harm that I may have caused in the situation? And then that leads to a conversation around that. Sometimes there's just like, give me a hug and a kiss, and they're fine. And other times it might be talking about, well, mommy, I need you to do these two things when this happens next time, right? And me having to commit to agreeing with that. There's, and that's important, is the follow-up. Like we can't just say these things to our kids, because then they'll start to learn that, oh, well, this is a lie, that you're lying to me, because that's how young children interpret that, right? If you're not following through, then it must mean that you are lying to me. And if you are lying to me, then you're not really someone I can fully trust. And so I need my kids to trust me. So, which means I have to be honest, and I have to deliver, and I have to be consistent, even if it makes me feel uncomfortable and I just want to walk away. So my biggest lesson learned with my kids is really to hit the pause button and to not say anything, not react immediately. And it's funny because it's a practice that I often, it's one that I do a lot of trainings around with teachers, right? So I'm having these conversations with educators about being culturally responsive to their students. A lot of the times we are practicing that pause as the adults in a classroom full of children that are not necessarily biologically ours, but we have to nurture and love and care for. So I've had to learn to also take in that practice as a parent with my kids. So
Thank you. That's such a great tip and reminder for all of us.
yeah.
You're on mute again, Anna.
Yeah. I told you my technology skills are
I'm glad I'm not
like
the only one
slowly
that does that.
creeping. But
Learning. We're always learning, right?
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I love the learning curve. I really wanted to just address that again because I actually didn't know about the pause for many years.
Mhm.
And I was already at the place where my children were beginning to feel unsafe and distressful, right? And when I learned about the practice of the pause, what I remember is just how challenging it was to intersect, all the blood flow, all the triggers, right? Like they're already there. And I just remember that even though I had learned about it, read it, listened to it, knew it about from my meditation practice, everything was just at the periphery, just ready to explode, right? And I think that the one thing that was such a huge motivator for me to really ignite the pause was when I did a tracing of just the ancestral pain within my family context, right? When I was able to acknowledge deeply and do some journaling work or just however, I just remember just even dreaming and thinking about these things that we are powerful enough to cut generational and epigenetic violence.
Yeah.
Right. That we can do it. Right. And I just remember thinking, how many more generations do I want this to be passed on? This way of reactivity, this way of not healing or not being in touch with my internal states. And just seeing how my children were reacting to me were also motivators. So just doing a lot of self-reflection, envisioning, and then really thinking about like, what would I rather it look like in those moments? And that was the only way I was able to ignite with the pause practice. So I just wanted to really say how powerful it is to get to that place of being able to ignite that practice. And then what you're saying, which is the consistency of it, is what really yields the transformation.
Yeah.
In the family context.
It is, and it's still, it's work. I know it's going to be ongoing work for me. And as you were saying, as you were talking and thinking about like sort of the history of trauma from our ancestors passed on from generation to generation, I was even thinking about, my parents and my father's childhood and like, so my father was born in Puerto Rico and he came when he was about 6 years old to New York City, and he grew up in El Barrio in Harlem, New York. And, growing up, I mean, this is a family of like 8 children, neither of the parents were able to work. My grandfather was, when he tried to work, he had a nervous breakdown. It's the classic story of being, someone who didn't know the language, was taken advantage by the system. They instituted him into a hospital where they did all the electric, work on his body. So then he could never work after that. And so now my grandmother and he are left to try to figure out how do we raise our children and feed them, like literally. So my father was growing up in survival mode, and when I think a lot of his behaviors as a parent in my household, which was very reactive, which was very like, sometimes loud and aggressive, verbally aggressive, and everything was like, we got to do it now, we got to go quick. And I just, for so long, couldn't understand why does he behave this way, right? But when I think back to his environment and his circumstances, like that was a result of him having to survive these really oppressive conditions, even if he's not living them anymore, right? It doesn't matter that he's not living them anymore. It still is like living within him and not having opportunities to heal from that. So like I'm in this moment in my life where I could name those things, name the things that he couldn't name, and to see those things. And it's not about like shaming my parents or blaming them, right? But it is about, like you said, taking control and being able to recognize there are some things that have happened in our family, our family's past, that we have to name, because even right now, me naming that is also helping me to acknowledge my reaction. because it has been passed on to me, like unconsciously, my need to always have to be on the go, not stop. We have to go, we have to get this done, because if we don't get these things done, in my father's circumstance, it was a matter of life or death. Like if we're not quick to do this thing, it means there's no money or no food on the table. So we have to react, we have to move. It was constant, always move, 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 move. And that movement is still something I carry in me. And I'm having to always like challenge myself to just wake up and don't do. Like stop the thinking, stop the needing, like you have to have an answer now, you have to go do this thing right away, you have to respond to this person. Like, and so yeah, meditation, yoga, those are the kinds of practices that I've been trying to do more regularly and do with my children, so that they too learn to pause in their lives. Like pausing is a good thing, taking time to breathe, taking time to sit in the moment and just like appreciate the silence. When I do that, makes a huge difference in my attitude and the way that I respond to my children. I'm much more open to responding in a more empathetic way than I am to like, we gotta go, we gotta get this thing done. So that is, yeah, that's really real, the generational trauma that a lot of our ancestors and grandparents and parents have, passed on to us. Yeah.
Thank you, Trisha, for sharing that so intimately with us. Those stories of the ancestors who've come before us and endured those kinds of patriarchal oppressive abuses make my blood boil. But this work that we're doing is really the collective work that's being called for right now. And I mean, the fact that we have all these tools like the meditation and the yoga that were, 30, 40 years ago, like what is this that that wisdom from those lineages have been there and are returning for all of us to use now is just such a blessing. Such a blessing. Thank you for sharing that. That it really kind of highlights, and Anna Maria, thank you for bringing that up too. Highlights where we're coming from, and what we are needing to unlearn. Do you either of you have any other thing to add or other questions about that? Or
Oh, I could go all kinds of ways.
I know.
And I can go real deep with all of this, because this is really where my mind is right now, floating around all of this. I think that I feel so honored to be a holder of your story right now, Chemay. I think that that's really brings to light the depth and the intensity of being human. And it's interesting because I think about Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and people of color from around the world. And it's been really present in my mind lately in my writing, because it really is just so much. And I might start crying because it's just been so present for me. There's so many layers of undoing, of pain to hold that get passed on to our children, and almost blindly. In the healing that we can experience when we become aware of those things, and we can actually create change within our families, are like little grains of sand into that liberation. Even if we're still living in a colonial context, even if we're still living the effects of imperialism and colonialism and racism and all these different oppressions, each time, each generation does a little bit towards resisting living a blind life under those kinds of constructs, means that each time, each generation has the opportunity to envision what's after all this. I don't think that even our generation is at the place where we can say, what does life look like when all this oppression doesn't exist? but I feel like we can contribute towards strengthening the next generation and being those visionaries.
Yeah.
And I take that work really seriously. And I think that when you spoke of the pause, it reminded me how it woke me up. That was what woke me up, right? To say, I really believe in liberation. I really believe in humanity and humanity's right to be free, you know? And I mean, yeah, I could go on. Like I said, I could go on, but I just wanted to thank you so much. I really honor the story of your grandfather. May he be honored in all that he experienced.
Yeah, I mean, I've never, that's not a story that I don't think I've ever shared that publicly, honestly. I mean, it just came out in the conversation. Yes, it makes me emotional to think about the trauma that he experienced that was passed on to my father, his siblings, his wife, that was passed on to me. And in some ways have been passed on to my kids. And it's making me emotional. That there's moments where I when I think about my parenting and I think about my parents' parenting, like we're just trying to do the best that we can with what we have, the tools that we have, right? With what we know, we don't know what we don't know, right? So, my parents, I'm thankful for the family that I have, and that, I'm here today and I'm able to do things that I am today because of the many people that have raised me, my parents, my grandparents, my aunties, older cousins that have raised me all and have impacted me in various ways and have made me who I am today. My children who have made me who I am today. I'm really thankful for that. And I know that there are things that I'm still doing that my kids are going to have to undo, right? Things that I don't recognize, that I've begun to recognize, right? And there's already the harm that's been done, that I hope that I am giving them the tools and the language so that they can say, as they grow older, they also can add to, like you said, Ana Maria, like every generation is trying to sort of like do better than the previous, right? We're trying to put our footprint. And that's a hard thing for me to like swallow, right? Because like you want to think as a parent, I'm going to get all the things right? So, but I'm not. And I'm slowly accepting, like, I am not going to get all the things right. I don't know what are all the other things I'm not going to get right. I just really hope that I can acknowledge and learn from them, and that my kids will also acknowledge and learn and do better for their future children or other people's future children. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's how we evolve, right? As people, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just want to hold that. I want to simmer in that for a second. That was beautiful. That was a beautiful moment to share together. Yeah, and it's interesting, I know that it's not disconnected. Like we didn't go off on another path. Like we're still very much so simmering in this idea of deschooling and unschooling as a practices towards building whole families. And I am curious if you want to share or just touch a little bit on how that looks like for you guys. Like how does it look like to unschool your beautiful children? And are you struggling with anything specific? And how do you see your moments of deschooling helping to move through something that got stuck in some way? Just if you're willing to just share, because I think we learned so much from, at least the three of us have learned so much with how it looks like in our real lives. It would be beautiful to hear your experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love hearing other people's stories, which is one of the things I love about the village, is having the opportunity to hear other people. When you came on and the other moms came and shared, I learned so much. And also it's reaffirming that, one, I'm not crazy, that two, this is all normal, right? And that three, like there's all of these other possibilities, right? To experience by hearing other people's stories. So yeah, for us, honestly, like a lot of times it does feel like we're having a staycation every day, to be honest. I mean, it doesn't mean that every day is like we're sitting out in the sun. That's not necessarily what I mean by that, but it doesn't feel forced. You know, there are times, the struggle is the times where I feel like I should be like forcing something onto my kids, right? And the moments where I feel that is most felt like when we are sitting down to do something that might seem like academic. So if we're sitting down to read and like they enjoy having me read, but oftentimes I'll say, okay, well, why don't you pick out a story for you to read? And then that's usually where like, you know, my kids will tense up, especially my eldest one. My youngest one, not as much, but I'm not reading a story. I just want you to read to me. And then of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, but how if he doesn't practice, right? Even if it's just one little book that takes like 5-10 minutes for him to read, you know, if he doesn't practice, I need him to know how to read. Like, you know, he needs to know how to read signs, you know, how to read recipes. Like, you know, he needs to know how to be able to read to get his license one day. This is a life skill. It's not just something that I want him to just know just for the sake of knowing. I know that in order to navigate and live in our world, reading is a necessary skill to have to be able to like survive in our modern world. So those are probably the moments where that's where I have the biggest struggle. And I have to, you know, there are times where we'll start to bump heads, everything gets tense. And then I just like, forget it. You know, I'm like, let it go. Let me let it go. And then once I'm calm, I can come back to him and, you know, apologize again and say, I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to force, because when you force things onto kids, then it does feel like a task, and they don't understand the connection to it in real life. And it does feel like it's some kind of busy thing. So, and then of course, always, you know, my kids will read, you know, like my kids will read when we are, you know, when they're in the mood, when we're in the moment. You know, I feel like I have to worry so much about that but I don't. I know that I don't, and I shouldn't. But, you know, there's all these pressures of like, you know, your son's about to be 9 years old, and, you know, he's reading, if he were in school, he'd probably be reading at, you know, like a 1st or 2nd grade level. And so I know that's foolishness. I know intellectually, like that's stupid schoolishness mentality. Like there's no such thing as like grades and levels. Like people progress when they progress. You know, when he's 25, no one's going to ask, when did you learn how to read? No one's going to give a damn by that time. I know all that. And also, like, it's a struggle. It's real. I know that.
Yeah.
So those are my hardest moments. But in general, like, yeah, I'm not forcing that into my kids. Like in general, my biggest job is to really spend my time paying attention to what the things are that my kids really love to do. And then, you know, through those passions, they're almost always like the fundamental things of like, I think about reading, basic writing, and basic math. Like those fundamentals always fall into play at some point in any of the things that they're doing, whether it's they're playing Minecraft, whether it's like, I want to go research whatever animal it is for the day that they're researching. All of those things involve that. When we're going grocery shopping, money is always something that comes into play, and counting and adding and subtracting and blah, 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 blah. Like, so you know, a regular day for us is just living life and doing the things we have to do to live, right? And that includes the fun, and includes like the not so fun things, like having to go grocery shopping, which I hate to do, but we got to eat, so we got to go grocery shop. And everyone has a responsibility in that, including my children. So they help with the budgeting, and that involves math, right? So I do like letting go of like the names of subjects, but more like naming it as like, these are practices that, you know, we have to learn how to add money, because, well, we live in a world that uses money. And so you have to be able to know how to do that if you're going to not go broke and make sure you have food on your table to eat. So yeah, we wake up. Usually we set an intention for the day, or several intentions, you know, like what are our intentions? What are our goals? What do we want to accomplish? Usually I'm asking my kids, what is something you want to practice and get better at? Is there something new you want to learn, discover, problem solve, something that you want to do more of or less of? And then we'll have a conversation about it. Usually they won't want to write it on the board, which, you know, I won't pressure, because my goal for them is not so much the writing, but is the practice of setting intentions for the day. And so either they will or I'll write it, and we write it on our little chalkboard. And then throughout the day, we'll check in sometimes and see like, what do we get accomplished today? And oftentimes there's some things we do, and sometimes they're crossing off in the middle of the day. Mommy, add this to the, add this. I want to do this today, right? Or, you know what, I changed my mind, take that thing off. We're going to add something else. That's how our day flows, really, honestly. And then sometimes they'll say, I want to do this thing tomorrow. I decided I don't want to do it today, but I want to do this tomorrow. Could we do this tomorrow? I want to go fishing tomorrow. Could we add that on our things to do tomorrow, Mommy? So they are co-creating their schedules, you know, together we're co-creating each other's schedules for the days. And sometimes it involves doing things at home or leaving the house, meeting up with other folks, going somewhere. With COVID now, we're definitely more home than usual. You know, we're almost or never home before. We're just always out somewhere. So even though people think people who unschool or home educate are like home all the time, but it isn't true. I'm never home. So COVID hit us hard too. You know, we were not used to being home all the time and all of our activities being in one place. So, so yeah, that's normal for us to just figure it out as we go along. You know, it's, and then having a lot of mentors on our side, you know, like I'm not the only like guide in my children's life. They're not my only guides, you know. Abuela down the street, you know, we'll do art projects with them sometimes. You know, they get together with their cousins on Fridays to do some like science-based, you know, they like to do a lot of like science, like experiments and things like that. My sister loves doing that stuff, so they'll do that together with each other. But most of the time they are building and creating things. I mean, that's what kids just instinctually do, right? They like to like tinker with things and break things apart and put things together. And so I have learned to just enjoy that and to let them be in those moments and to support them and to, you know, support them in seeing like things that maybe they didn't see in their creation. And they do the same to me, right? Like there are things I don't see that they see as they're building and creating. So yeah, that's how it's been for us. Just that's the way it is in our house. It's very laid back. Yeah.
I wanted to pull something out from what you were talking about with reading.
Yeah.
And you guys can tell me if your experience is this way or not, but I found, right, so again, with conventional schooling, like reading is very performative. It's like this thing you have to do, you have to do it, someone has to judge you on it. And I found that with my own kids learning how to read on their own naturally, it's almost like they didn't want anyone to point out that they were reading until they themselves felt like they had perfected it. Like my older two read, my youngest is sort of just learning. And even yesterday he was asking me to look something up and he told me all the letters in the word, he spelled it for me. And I was like, that's reading. And he's like, no, it's not, I'm not reading, you know. And it's almost like this thing where like, when it's their own desire, it's something they want to do for themselves, they set the parameter, like they set their own achievement, like what it means to achieve the goal. And they don't want to hear that, they don't want to be told that they're reading unless they themselves feel like they're reading up to this level. So
that's so interesting.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad that you said that because I experienced that with Judah a lot, you know, where he will say things like, you know, Mommy, I don't know how to read yet. And I look at him like, what? And I realized in that conversation that he has set a certain, I guess, standard of what reading is for himself. I think sometimes he's comparing himself now that he's getting older and he's that he's meeting more kids his age that are reading more fluently than he is. And so I think he's making this comparison of like, well, if I'm not reading like that, I must not be reading. And it's like, well, you are reading. Maybe you're not reading the same kind of words yet or the same kinds of sentences, but you are. So it's really interesting how, you know, I mean, he literally will read me a book and still tell me he's not reading. I'm like, but you just read a book to me. Yeah. I mean, I'm thankful. I can't imagine if we were in a school setting where there was all this pressure for them to perform a certain way. because if he's already picking up, you know, on his own, that kids his age are reading or demonstrating reading skills that are a little bit different than mine, and he's being conscious of that, right? I can't imagine what then that he would feel like in an actual school setting, and not, you know, because the pressure is like 10 times fold, right? I mean, it doesn't impact him emotionally in the way that I've seen when I was a reading teacher, kids who were 14 and reading, who could barely read, right? It's not impacting him in that kind of way, but I think it's because we're not in settings where there's that pressure to perform. Even it's a beautiful thing when I see him with it. So he's got some good friends and they go together to a nature year program on Saturdays. They spend the day together there. It's a drop off, we pick up. And so one day I went to pick them up, and he and his brother and his friends were together, and Judah says, I need your phone. I want to show something that he had researched to his friends. Okay, give him his phone. And I'm just watching, and he's trying to type in the question, and I guess found him the thing that he found last time on the internet. And he's like, how do you spell? He's like, Mommy, how do you spell whatever the word was? I don't remember. And his friend Miles says, oh, I think it's, and you know, he starts to, and I just, and this is a kid who's maybe like a half a year older than he is. And who is more of a fluent reader than Judah is. But there was no, but they both have been unschooled, you know, since they were young. These were kids that had never really been to formal schooling. So Miles, you know, I remember talking to his mom afterwards thinking like, I think it's so beautiful, their friendship. And I love how, you know, he has a network of friends that just jump in and support him. Don't judge him. Don't say like, you can't spell that 3-letter word. Like, what's wrong with you? How old are you? Like, which is what I hear, you know, I might hear like a cousin say that, or I might hear another child who's been to school say those things. I mean, I know that they're not saying that out of like mean-spirited, right? But I know that that's their conditioning living in a school setting, because that has been told to them. Someone else probably told them that at some point, like, how old are you? And you're not reading this yet? Like, how could you not know these words? So I just love the beauty in him being able to do that so freely without anyone judging him, without him feeling ashamed, and him continuing to ask for more help. Like, this was just, it was normal. It was normal for them to do this and not anyone judge that situation and make them feel bad for learning to spell at their time and their pace. It was just beautiful. And that's one of the things that just reaffirms me, like, we're on this right path. Like, this is the kind of learning experience they should feel, you know, friends coming in to help, you know, no one telling them or judging them where they should be and what they should be doing. I just wish so many kids could experience that, you know, what my kids are experiencing. So.
I'm about to jump in. So if any sister wants to say something, Dhyāna, I see you nodding.
No, just loving all of this kind of fly on the wall insight into your world with your family and unschooling, and such great practices that you know are going to be so useful for the listeners to incorporate into their lives. And I will also, you know, incorporate more into our lives too. So just feeling gratitude and yeah, for the all that sharing and that insight. Yeah, just wanted to say that. Thank you. I know, Anna Maria, you have.
I love it.
Just because, I mean, I just want to say this because, and I was thinking of Lisa too. I could feel Lisa just shining, because this is a conversation that the three of us have had, right? Just an admiration of what happens to these unschooling children when they come together. There's just this natural instinct to collaborate. And all of a sudden, you know, in school, you get to like, oh, this is your team and you have to do this collective project. And it's all so categorized and structured.
It's so premeditated, right? Like, it's
yes.
and
And
do that.
Power is
Exactly.
taken out of their own hands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then so you get to experience, I mean, I guess for the four of us, for the first time, we get to experience human beings in sort of like our immediate entorno, como se dice en español, which is just like our surrounding, our immediate surrounding. We get to experience human beings activate their natural gifts. And one of those, as you named, is collaboration.
Yeah.
And then you see, oh, you don't know this? This is how it's done. And
Yeah.
remember, I know, Lisa, you brought it up once about the granny cloud, the TED talk about the granny cloud. And this was a very similar piece, right? That if somebody didn't know, somebody else who knew would show. And then all of a sudden, just through the engagement of the collaboration of an experience of learning together, more learning takes place. There's more of an expansion. And I love that. I love that you brought that up. And it's really true. I just want to say to our listeners, it's true.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really, you know, for me, unschooling and self-directed education is really, it's really about instinct. Like I see self-directed education as instinctual learning, right? It is about finding how our bodies were born to learn naturally and following the flow of that. And so, you know, our kids are much more in tune with that naturally, right? When they go to school, they are conditioned to lose that intuition. And then we as adults who have been through that process have to like relearn all that shit all over again. And so my kids have been teaching me really by just not interfering and letting them be kids, right? They are showing me how learning is intuitive and that it really happens naturally and that you don't have to force it and you don't have to have a bunch of standards and checklists that tell you do this and do that, and that reading can happen in any old way. You know, that we see all of these reading programs that pop up, these ads and say, no, now it's phonics is a thing. No, holistic reading is it. No, back to phonics, back to this, back to, like, there's always this back and forth. And my thing is like, why can't we just accept that there's multiple ways to just learn? And there's not just one right way to do it. And if we just pay attention to our children, right, they'll show us what's comfortable for them, right? They'll show us, yes, we could introduce things, right? And in introducing, we'll know whether things work for them or they don't. And if they don't, it's okay to let go of that. So yeah, for me, it's just, you know, really believing that, you know, reminding myself to listen to my body, and also, you know, having that conversation with my kids around like, what is your body telling you? What are you feeling right now? Follow your body. No one regrets listening to their gut. We regret not listening to it, right? But we never regret when we listen to our intuition. I've never met anyone said, gee, I wish I didn't listen to my intuition last week. Right? Like, no one says that. We say a lot, I should have listened to what my gut was telling me yesterday.
And so much of that learning happens through play. Under what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, so many animals learn through play. And like in science, we're like, yes, well, that's how they learn to survive and learn all these skills. Well, why aren't we
do the same?
Us.
We do the same.
We do.
And I don't think we ever stop, right? Like as adults, we play in different ways, right? And their play changes as they become teenagers and then early 20s, you know, like it looks different, but yeah, that's our tool to learn. That's how we
Chemay, I'm aware of our time together coming to a close, and in honoring your time that you've given to this conversation. Did either you, Lisa, or Anna Maria, have anything else you wanted to ask, or before we start to wrap this up?
Well, I was going to say, if we had a few more minutes, I did want to hear more. We wanted to hear more about the My Reflection Matters Village, and yes, just your vision for that and your hopes for and all that you've done so far.
Sure. This was such a good conversation. Oh my God, there's so many things that I'm going to be thinking about tonight after today. So I appreciate this conversation. You know, so My Reflection Matters Village, it is a co-learning community in the sky. We sort of have 3 different levels to the village. There's a free network, so anyone can, well, folks can request to enter. There's a little bit of vetting that goes on in order to enter the space. And then once they're in, they are in the main network, which is really much like a lobby. It's a space where folks can kind of get a taste of like what are the happenings in the other sort of 2 levels of the village. We have some events in the main network that folks are invited to join, which I know Ana Maria was a part of one of those events. And so the idea really for me when I created the village was how I'm always looking for community, you know, and when I first started our cooperative, our physical cooperative in Waterbury, even prior to developing that, I had a website, My Reflection Matters, which I still have .org. And when I developed the website, initially was thinking I wanted this to be more interactive. Like I didn't want it to be just a space where parents and educators who were struggling to find culturally responsive educational resources, tools to use at home or in the classroom. I didn't want it to just be that. I wanted it to be a space where we can engage, where we could have workshops and we could have events together where we're kind of like diving deep into some of those resources. At that time, I didn't really have the tools to do that in a really cost-effective way. It was just too expensive, but technology has changed so much in such a small amount of time. It's like amazing. And so I had this opportunity during COVID, which is like a perfect time, right? Because we couldn't even meet up physically with our co-op, to figure out how do we take this work into the sky. And so I was introduced to the Mighty Networks platform, which I really love because it's moving us away from Facebook and all the busyness that Facebook has, that just actually distractions, right? Because you go in to say, I want to go into the My Reflection Matters Facebook group, and you don't end up going there because you get like 10 other posts that are totally irrelevant, that you dive into like this rabbit hole of like distractions for like 2 hours, right? And you never go to get the actual information you need. So in the Mighty Networks, having the village there has been a really great benefit because we focus on just our content. There's no ads to distract you. You get immediate notifications when we are having an upcoming event or someone has posted something to share with the community. You can get the notifications straight from there without notifications from other things. And also you don't have algorithms that distract you from getting the content, which is what was happening with our group. I would find out that we would have, you know, members that say, you had an event, but I didn't know about it. I'm like, oh, we posted in the group, but because they're not on Facebook all the time, they may not, when they go onto Facebook, Facebook thinks, oh, algorithm says you don't like this group, so we're not going to show you their posts. So they would miss out on the posts, not because they weren't interested, just because of how less frequent they were on Facebook. So the algorithms just mess everyone up. So yeah, we're in the sky now, and in this space, it really is, the idea is to support primarily BIPOC families that have opted out of the system, or they may still be in the system, but recognize the system is not going to fully support my children. So I'm looking for some resources, some support, some tools to supplement what I'm doing at home in terms of my parenting. But everyone that enters the space is definitely on a journey, and recognizing that we are looking to dive into a liberated pathway in terms of how we're living our life, however that looks, whether I'm an educator or whether I'm a parent, and they are looking for some of the tools and resources to support them. So that's what the space is for. We do offer 2 paid memberships. There's a lower tier, which gives folks access to the culturally responsive resource village. So if they want to be in community with folks who are either creating tools and resources or want to share them, it's great because I'm not the only one that's sharing. Now I have a whole community that's sharing, which I absolutely love. And then we also have some events that we have in that group. And then we have a higher tier, which is really for families who are really deep in self-directed education and really want to be in community with other folks that are in self-directed education. So we actually offer like monthly like community coaching calls where we come in together as a community, and we decide as a community like what are the things that we want to address and talk about. What are the joys of self-directed education? What are some of the roadblocks some of us are experiencing, and the support that we can provide to each other around that, questions that we have. And then we have weekly sort of check-ins with each other, and we're sharing things, conversations like this, like, what does your schedule look like today? Like, what's something that happened today that was unexpected, but like was amazing? What's something that happened that was unexpected that wasn't so amazing? So, so yeah, and then we have Patreon, which is a way that folks can support the work of the village. So folks can pay a sponsorship, whether they want to pay $1 a month, $20 a month, whatever it may be. And then that money helps to supplement, because we have a sliding scale for our full paying members. So that it helps to supplement it allows us to actually have a sliding scale. And also that money allows us to also, my goal is to be able to pay for more of the learning experiences that are offered in our community. So we have partners that offer learning experience both for adults and for children to support decolonized learning at home and decolonized parenting. And, you know, some of them right now are like, you know, you have to pay a partner to engage in it because that's the work that they do. But I would love to be able to get to a point where we could actually pay them so that it's free to the community. So we're growing, we'll get there.
Such a beautiful thing you created, really just huge undertaking and so well thought out. And I mean, every detail that you just named even. And I've been on the village. It's so beautiful. Yeah.
I love having you guys there. You guys have been amazing. You've been sharing some amazing content. I mean, I love it. Every time I'm in there, I'm like, this is, and I love like I'm less and less on Facebook and more in there, right? Like, and it's just so much more meaningful. Like it's the conversations, the content, like the relationships that we're building with people that we haven't even met like physically. It's just amazing.
I just admire all the layers that you've created and the vision and that you've manifested it, and just props.
Well, it takes a village, so
gratitude,
I'm not alone in it.
So much gratitude.
Yeah, I mean, just to close up around that, I just want to be like a testimony to here's a Cassie saying hi.
Hey.
I just want to give a huge testimony about the village that, you know, for so long, you know, I've been unschooling for 16 years, and just for the first half of my time unschooling, it was a real struggle finding other women of color, Latina women, families who had been unschooling. And so I felt like there were issues that I was having that had a lot to do with my culture, my process, or the fact that we're a mixed family, that I just couldn't bring up around my white unschooling peers. So when the village happened, when, you know, Akila Richards and Malika Diggs and all these people that have been building up more of a voice for BIPOC people around unschooling, it just became more of a, how can we all come together? You know, how can we actually, and I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about how can we create these spaces where we can have these conversations. And yes, slowly and surely, everybody is creating these beautiful spirals of connection. And it's really neat to see how they're like concentric circles coming together.
They really are.
So I'm really fascinated by that. So just a testimonial to say the village is amazing. If you can join, we'll link all those links to your contacts. If that's okay with you, we'll link your websites and in the village, so everybody can go visit Chemay's work. Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate the feedback. So it's nice to hear how people are experiencing it, because I feel good about the experience I'm having, but I don't always know how other people are experiencing it. So I appreciate you all.
Awesome. Lisa, did you have anything you wanted to add? Oh, you're on mute.
I feel like we could just talk all day, right? We could just keep on going and going and going, but we're already over time. So I'm just so thankful to have had this opportunity to chat with you and hear your story and hear about all the wonderful work you're doing and supporting other families, and really just growing this message of like, there are other ways of being and other ways of knowing and other ways of learning. And I just think, right, the more these stories are out there, the more we normalize, you know, granting children autonomy, and the more children are granted autonomy, you know, it's just medicine for the whole world that we need. So
no, I appreciate you all doing this, and definitely, you know, share the link when this is all ready, so that I can also share the information in the village, so that folks keep up with all of the amazing interviews that you all are doing. This is good stuff.
Will do. And would
Thank
love to
you.
have you visit with us again. Maybe we
Oh my
can.
God, I want to visit in person. You guys aren't that
Yes.
far from me.
Definitely.
Yes. We
Okay, we
totally
will
have to
follow up
go.
with that as well.
Yeah, we definitely have to schedule something.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chemay. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to seeing you guys in the village.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Yes. Bye. honey.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, that was so cool.
That was
I'm
fun.
gonna just pause the record, stop the recording.